Welcome to our July Procurement Talk. I'm Sarah Scudder, President of Real Sourcing Network. We are a software and solution provider in the print and marketing services space. We are innovating to try to help companies change the way they buy print and marketing services. Procurement Talks is a monthly series that we host with our partners to bring the procurement community together to collaborate, network, and my favorite, tell stories. Each month, our group of panelists share their procurement nightmares, train wrecks, and meltdowns. They also reveal the wisdom gained from their mistakes and how they have learned to refine their skills and add more value to their companies. I'd like to take a moment to thank our sponsors who make our Procurement Talk series available to you live and on demand all year. I'm going to ask each of them to spend a minute or so telling you how they're innovating in their spaces. Eric, I'm going to start with you from Rapid Ratings.
Great. Thanks, Sarah. And appreciate it. We're happy to be a sponsor of Procurement Talks. So everyone, enjoy the insights and conversations of today's panel. Rapid Ratings is setting the standard for financial health transparency between business partners and transforming the way the world's leading companies manage enterprise and financial risk. So we're known for our sophisticated analysis of financial health of public and private companies, and also for sourcing those financials of private company suppliers in over 140 countries on behalf of our clients. As we know, it's really, really hard to get those. And we have predictive analytics, which provide insights into how suppliers, vendors, and other third parties are likely to perform. So we've been really busy with COVID, conducting stress tests for our clients on their vendors or suppliers to help anticipate the impact, obviously, from the global downturn. So we've been shocking the revenues down by industry, depending on what analyst estimates are. So it's been a busy time, but thanks, Sarah. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for joining us, Eric. I know New York is getting a lot better, so I'm happy to hear.
Yes, fingers crossed. Thanks. You stayed low.
All right, next we've got Sanjeev from Techwison.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sanjeev Santa, and I'm one of the co-founder of Techwison. We have two lines of business. One is the SOW piece of business, where we deal with 5 different kind of technology. One is Microsoft technology, anything related with Microsoft. Then open source technology. If anyone wants to develop an application or product using open source, so it will have no license and all. Anything with cloud migration. The fourth thing is Salesforce implementation. And the last thing is fintech technologies. Some key technologies which are only being developed by companies based out of Israel and all. So those technology we work with. And the last piece of the business is we staff most of those projects. So these are the two lines of business, and we are based out of 7 countries. Just last week, we completed 11 years in the business.
Yes, congratulations. 11 years is a big milestone.
It is indeed. Thank you so much.
Well, a big thanks to Rapid Ratings and Techwison for sponsoring our series. So the format for today's event is a panel, and I encourage the use of the chat and Q&A functions at the bottom of your Zoom screen. We typically have a pretty lively chat discussion going throughout our event, so don't be shy. We will also have 2 polls for you to complete throughout. Brandon on the team, who you can see his photo with the bow tie, he's managing the technology for day, and he'll also be managing the polls. We'll do one at the beginning and one at the end. Susan Walsh, our panel moderator, will be managing the Q&A and asking your questions to the panelists throughout the discussion. So again, feel free to put those in either the Q&A or the chat function. I'm going to turn things over to Susan so she can introduce herself. But before I do, I want to share a few fun facts about her. Susan is allergic to pretty much every single animal on the planet except fish. Last year, she went to the Scottish Deer Center, which is all outdoors, and after an hour and a half, she left wheezing and sneezing. So this is no joke. She's had multiple UDIs, which are unidentified drinking injuries. She has sold bras on QVC. Her dad calls her Boozy Susie. And she has a pretty awesome shoe collection that she can no longer wear due to a bad foot, but she'll never let go of it. And I've been pushing her, and so hopefully we'll get to actually see a couple pairs of shoes today. I have not yet seen them, and I hear they're pretty cool. So with that, Susan, I will turn things over to you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. So I think, first of all, I should deliver on my promises. So this is my first pair of shoes. They're slightly holographic. It's my favourite brand. They're called Irregular Choice.
Are those flowers?
They are, yeah.
Okay.
So they're my everyday kind of shoe. And then something a little bit special for when I want to get really dressed up are my Muppet shoes. And the soles are amazing. They've got spikes. Even they're too good to wear, but I love them to bits. So that's just two pairs of my shoe collection. So, I think you get a sense of my style from the shoes, from the top, from the background. But who am I? Well, in case you don't know me, and I can see a few familiar names in the chat, I'm Susan Walsh. I'm the classification guru, and I'm a fixer of dirty data. Lots and lots of dirty spend data in particular. I specialise in data classification and customising taxonomies, helping organisations save money, save time, make better business decisions based on the accurate data that they should have. I'm not native to North America, as you might tell. I was born in Scotland and grew up there, and then moved down to England about 20 years ago. So I live just outside London now. So it's later in the day for me, but it's really great to be here. And I am really looking forward today to moderating this panel and introducing you to a great range of hosts. So this is July's edition. Today, it's going to be a safe space where we can share our tortured moments with each other. We can, be relieved that it didn't happen to us in other cases, and just really share those experiences. And, the panel are going to share some great stories and maybe not so great experiences with us today. So, let's not beat about the bush here. Let's dig right in. Let's find out the nitty-gritty details. And we'll start with Simona. What is the scariest or most shocking thing that you have encountered so far in your career?
So thank you, Susan. The shoes are fabulous. All the chats are your shoes rock. So that's pretty cool.
And the background, yeah.
Yes. Hi, everyone. My name is Simona Rabsatt Butler. I am a strategic sourcing, global sourcing with Visa currently. My previous roles in companies was Quicken Loans for about 3.5 years. And prior to that, I was with Walmart Corporate for almost 10 years. My experiences I'm going to share with you guys today date back to kind of some of the fun life of Walmart and Sam's Club. So the scariest and probably most shocking, more shocking than scary, was at the time I was leading procurement for Walmart marketing specifically. The Sam's Club team reached out to me to help with a contract negotiation with a supplier they had been using for a while that had developed some technology that was specific for Sam's Club. So it was specially done. It was a company they had really had a handshake agreement with. It was one of those back in the days type of things that was going on. And they realized they had a sourcing support that could help. They reached out to me. I set up time. We had conversations. I understood what was going on. The day came for us to finally get in front of the supplier to talk through the concerns with what was going on, as well as renegotiate contracting. Well, things were going pretty well. At least I thought things were going pretty well. And then at one point, I realized the supplier was really starting to dig in on a piece of the conversation that we were having around the technology and some of the upgrades and changes that we needed to do that was specific to the business need for the business partner. They, we weren't aligning on the financials. We weren't aligning on the timing. We weren't aligning on a lot of the different elements of this particular ask. So I put it on pause and said, okay, we are getting through that one. Let's move on to the next one. So we went on to some of the next ones, came back to that one. They dug in again. So I said, okay, let's take a break. So we took a break. I took my business partners out of the room. I said, hey, these are our options. We can either continue this line of conversation that's not moving, or, we can find a middle ground. Are you willing to do that? Or we can walk away. So we said, well, here's the middle ground. Go back in, try to push our middle ground. They're not having it. They're digging in. And not just digging in, but the heat in the room and the anger in the room and the pushback in the room just kept getting higher and higher. And you can feel the tension just getting worse and worse. So I finally, I was shocked at how tense it had gotten. It was probably the most tense I'd ever had in a negotiation. And here I am now leading the team. So I didn't have my boss to go to and say, help, like what's going on here? Give me some advice, whatever. I'm now that person. So at one point I got angry at the fact that they weren't willing to give or help us find a middle ground. So we did one more break. And I took my business partners out of the room and I said, this is what I'd like to do if you're okay with it. I'm shutting it down and I'm sending them home. And if we can't, if they can't come up with a middle ground at that point, then we are officially escorting them out of the building. And the business partners were up for it. So I go back in. Now, mind you, I'm 5'2", right? And here I am negotiating with some, heavy honchos here. And so I go in and I say, hey guys, we've gone through this. We've provided our stance. You're not giving us any middle ground here. So I am suggesting right now that we shut down the negotiations. We are going to escort you guys out, and we'll regroup on our end. We'll let you guys regroup on your end, and we'll catch up with you in about a week or two. And they started to backpedal, and I just was like, nope. We're shutting it down. And they just were shocked. At first they stood there for about 5 seconds, like, she didn't just do that, did she? I was like, yep. And so we literally shut it down. I escorted them out of the building, and we came back in about 2 weeks, and we found our middle ground and we came to a solution. But that was the first time I literally just shut it down. Wow. So how did you feel after that? There was a lot of fast heartbeats, a lot of sweating, right? Because that was the first kind of truly tense negotiation that I'd had as a sourcing professional. But I stood my ground. I just couldn't let my business partners continue to be berated and not finding that middle ground. And when I finally said, we're shutting it down, their whole faces and that kind of just dumbstruck that I would actually do that. And I was like, no, you can do that in negotiation. And I'm exercising that right. Great. Well, before we move on to the others, you'll see there's a quick poll that's popped up. So we're just asking you at the moment if you believe your home state, or do you believe your home state is handling the pandemic and the reopening appropriately? So the answers are yes, I feel we're doing what's best, or we're on the right path, but we could have done more, or we started out okay, but we're feeling the trending in the wrong direction. No, we could have done better, or you're not sure. So we'll give that a couple of minutes and then we'll get some results and Brandon can deliver those. But in the meantime, I think, Mike, you've probably got a few great stories that you can share with us on shocking or scary experiences.
So as an introduction, I'm Mike Morsch. I'm the Vice President of Global Procurement Supply Chain at a software company called CDK Global. I also had responsibility for the real estate organization globally, as well as some of the the entire repair operations for some of the equipment that we sell to our primary customers, which are car dealerships across North America and the globe. So mine actually falls more into the nightmare area, perhaps, than some of the others. I love the shutdown that Simona did, though, right? So you don't often get that opportunity to do it, and that's kind of one of those things that it's like it lives in the lore of procurement that you just come in and you shut down everything and you kick everybody out, right? So that's an amazing, great story. The nightmare that I kind of went through is not at my current company. Nothing I'm really talking about will be about the current place, but previous company when I was leading the IT procurement function. And we were a large multinational electronics manufacturer. And we had built up and centralized a lot of our operations over the years. And then we started going through mergers and acquisition, divestiture activities, right? So as part of these divestitures, there was a fairly large divestiture of one of our business units. And the nightmare really came out of us starting to dig in and figure out what we needed to do, as a very small group of people were brought in to talk about that. And I was fortunate enough to be part of that early group that had to start looking at this. And we thought we knew our spend. We thought we knew our contracts. And as we started diving into it, we started finding more and more spend than anybody realized. More and more agreements that didn't seemingly get touched by someone in a procurement function, whether it was the global procurement team or the IT procurement team. And just as the reality of more spend, contracts without rights to assign, right to use, all these things, all those things coming in, it was just a nightmare of trying to get our heads around it. And to add further to it, since it was a big effort, we thought, well, let's go get some consulting help. And we did. We got some advice from them. And then kind of little did I know that, some of the advice that the consulting firms came back with was, hey, as you do a divestiture, you can, of course, probably take some opportunities to get some cost savings. And they put a number on a slide, and somehow that slide became like my commitment. So not only did we have to divest this entity, which was multi-billion dollars, suddenly I'm on the hook for this cost savings number that I guess in my heart I never felt I signed up for, but it didn't matter, right? I was up to the task, and we had to go after it and do it. So it was a nightmare to kind of get after it. It was very satisfying once we kind of worked our way through it. I don't know if we got every dollar of cost savings that I was handed, via that slide, but I think the nightmare opened our eyes so wide that it actually scared us into doing just a tremendous job. So that was my nightmare experience. I kind of wished I got to do the shutdown that Simona did. That sounds like more fun.
And have you encountered similar situations again, or was that just a one-off?
Kind of sad to say. I've seen this happen a few times, to tell you the truth. Right?
It was great practice.
On a smaller scale, but that was probably the biggest scale to kind of scare me straight in that situation.
Well, thanks very much for sharing that. If we move on to Michael next, I'm sure that you have had to deal with some crises in your time. Are there any that you can think of that required some creativity and problem solving?
Yes. So quick intro, a little bit of interesting background. So Michael Leiken, I am from a small farming community in central Illinois. I'm a lifelong Cubs, Bulls, and Bears fan, and actually ended up in Miami for school, where I ended up staying for 16 years. My family moved to Charlotte 4 years ago for an opportunity at LendingTree, where I built and managed the spend management function. And in thinking about crisis and interesting situations requiring creativity and some on-the-fly problem solving, the perfect example for me would be when I was in Miami and working at a company called Knight Ridder. Back in 2005, Hurricane Katrina hit in August, and then later in October, actually, Hurricane Wilma followed. And Knight Ridder is a newspaper company, and we had a property, the Sun Herald, in Biloxi, Mississippi, and it was just completely devastated. And living through and responding to a natural disaster of any kind was a completely new experience for me. It was one of those things that you've seen on the news or in movies countless times, but until you're really in the thick of it, you can't really fully understand, and the emotions aren't the same. And I was actually very inspired by the company's response and call to action, and focus on putting the employees above everything else. And as part of that effort, I managed what we ended up calling RV Central. I don't really know the number, but many of the families that worked for the Sun Herald, they lost everything. And so I was responsible for handling everything related to RVs, which we were providing as homes for those employees and their families. And so that included anything to track them down, which wouldn't seemingly seem difficult, but given related efforts by FEMA and other agencies was quite difficult. Trying to negotiate very flexible, unusual terms since things were so uncertain at the time. Literally doing deposits with credit cards, finding employee volunteers, and coordinating pickups and transport. And I even joined a colleague, James Kettle, and we did a nonstop drive from Miami to Biloxi and back, taking an RV stocked full of supplies. And, up to that point, I'd never even looked at an RV online, much less in person. So I guess somewhat related was during Wilma. Living in Miami, we've been through several hurricanes, and it's common to lose access to and run out of gas, in areas that are impacted. And in order to maintain operations, we needed to secure supply, both for our fleet, for going to distribution centers, as well as for our carriers. And, I found myself calling anywhere and everywhere that you could possibly get fuel. The marina, gas stations, tanker companies. Fortunately, we were able to negotiate private use of individual gas stations. But then, of course, there was the follow-on operational piece of managing access and processing how you paid and everything else. And we also had a few trucks that were able to dispense directly into vehicles. So that was interesting and different. So some of the key takeaways, I guess, for me and going through that was, I'd always included and had disaster recovery or business continuity plans and contracts, but this was the first time that in my career it was real and mattered in any way. And also the realization of the importance of my own company's emergency response plans, and not just due to managing disruption of supply chain, but also just for your fellow employees' safety and well-being. So
thanks very much, Michael. And last but not least, we have Stéphanie, and I'm sure you've got some great stories for us as well. So I would say, as a leader, how can you make sure that the right decision is being made during a difficult crisis situation?
Hi, I will introduce myself. My name is Stéphanie Leduc. I am a senior director in IT sourcing strategy and IT portfolio. I've been with National Bank of Canada in Montreal for more than 20 years. I left 3 years to another financial industry organization to implement the sourcing strategy and operating model. So thank you very much for the invite. I'm very excited to be here today. So to answer to your question, first of all, it takes courage to make a decision. As a leader, I believe that you don't have to take a decision by your own in your corner and then that's it, There's no one recipe for sure, but you work with colleagues, ask questions, ask information. I would say also that, stay fact-based. So fact-based decision, it helps a lot. And also I would say that, just trust your little voice also. Very often we shut down this voice, but it's also important. So it's a lot of a combination of things that helps to take the right decision. This is what I believe.
Great. Well, you guys have all had some pretty crazy experiences, kind of working on the periphery of procurement. It definitely sounds like there's a lot of back and forward discussions and promises made, maybe, that are a bit hard to achieve. Thanks very much for sharing all that. I think we've got the results of the polls if Brandon wants to talk us through them.
So, do you believe your home state is handling the pandemic and reopening appropriately? About 46% said, yes, I feel what we're doing is best. 20% on the right path, could be doing better. 15% feel like they started out okay, but are trending in the wrong direction. And about 20% feel that no, we could have done much better. So that's kind of interesting to me, though, that about 46%, that's a little higher than what I was expecting personally, but it's interesting to see.
Yeah, thanks. And what about the panel? Would you agree with that, or do you feel differently about your own states?
I think for me, I'm living between two states. I'm living between Arkansas and California. I think California did a really good job jumping on it and trying to figure it out. When we came across, we drove from California to Arkansas, and as we came across, we saw, what people were and weren't doing as we drove. And then when we landed here, it was a little shocking, the openness, right? They weren't adhering to the 6 foot. They weren't necessarily wearing masks, that type of thing. So the differential. And then once the numbers really started to skyrocket, then I've seen more of the mask and, 6 feet, more of that kind of communication coming out. But since we came in April, literally has been on the rise.
How about you, Stéphanie? You're in Canada, aren't you? So
yes, Montreal, it's a little bit difficult right now. We just reopened and then everything, restaurant, bar and stuff like that. And we feel like, I feel like, there's party everywhere. So I believe that we will step back at one point. And so it's a matter of time, but, maybe it's an exception. But what we've seen so far on the news, we feel like, oh my God, everything is open. So it's an open bar for everyone. So I feel like, and then they talk to put in place a mandatory mask when you travel or when you live in Montreal Island. So, they put in place few rules like that to make sure that, because we are waiting for the second wave. So I hope this wave will be smaller than the first one. We'll see. But it's very important to follow the rules. So it depends, where you live, I have to say.
Mike, what about you?
Yeah, I would say, we're Illinois. I would say the people of Illinois, they probably would, probably not give it as a high a rating. And part of that is just there's just so many different, counties and their makeup in Illinois, from the high population in the Chicago and Cook County area to a lot of the state that's very, not very populated, right? And so, the one size fits all initial approach was hard. I think as it got refined and people learned it, I think people saw it getting better from that standpoint. It's just, it's one of those things where to make even 50% of the people happy, I think that's a tough call when you're just in a situation that, is hard to deal with no matter what you deal with, right? And so if people do the basics, it feels like everyone's going to come out better on the end. So keeping the 6 foot distancing and that type of thing, and we, since I have real estate in my group, we spent a lot of time on how we're reopening our offices, and you have to be very thoughtful and look at it from the employee's perspective. So 46%, I'm a little surprised to see something that high.
Yeah. Thanks very much. Michael, what about you?
Yeah, so in North Carolina, it's been sort of a mixed bag. Initially, I think that a lot of the measures that were taken were appropriate. Seemed like most people were being pretty conservative and cautious. We're actually in the southernmost section of my backyard, borders South Carolina as well. And South Carolina has had a slightly different approach and much more liberal, much earlier to begin, phasing and reopening. And it's just been interesting to just, go to the store, Walmart, Simona. And, it can be scary, the amount of people and, people not taking precautions like wearing masks when there are those orders and it's so easy. So It's also ironic where obviously this is political. I mean, you can't get around politics, and you have different groups and business owners and churches that are suing and winning for the right to be open, and that's all fine and good. And then you have the challenges with schools and what's the plan and what's the decision for the different options for reopening in 6 weeks. But it's been a mixed bag. You go and see places where, despite what the instructions and guidance communicated is, there are just groups, massive groups congregating, and it's a little nerve-wracking at times.
It is. In the UK, we've just had the pubs back open, and I think in general, most people have been sensible, and a lot of people are still too afraid to go out. But if you Google Soho in London, the pictures from last Saturday are absolutely terrifying. I mean, that is a second wave just there happening. So, but again, it's the younger generation, I think, are not as maybe aware, or they think that they're not as susceptible to it. But it'll be interesting to see what happens. So before we move on, I've just got one quick question from Gokul for Stéphanie, and that is, what do we perceive as a stable return to procurement practices once this health crisis subsides? Do you envision any particular enhancement to existing processes, or would it be business as usual? And Gokul's in Canada, so that's why they were asking about your perspective.
For us, and on a procurement perspective, during the crisis, we, in terms of vendor management, we make a huge effort to make sure that, every services that we receive from the vendor, I'm laughing because of my picture, but, so we have to make sure that, during the crisis, we still continue to have the right services in place. So everything went well. So, it was really nice. But, in the future, the focus is more on the vendor management, because very, very, very often negotiation is good. It's one thing, but very often vendor management, it's good, but, but now we put in place, a better governance, I would say. And not only for vendor tier 1, but maybe more than that. So we are working on it right now to make sure that, we are more proactive if any other situation happen like that. So this is very, very important. But for us in the IT world, I have to say, everything went well. I mean, with the vendor, bigger, the big one or the smaller one, everything went well. So of course we follow them very, very closely, but, it makes me realize that, we very often we fight or we argue or debate about how important is governance and vendor management. But now, because of the crisis, it helps to moving forward on this one. So.
Thanks very much. Well, it's not all doom and gloom, and not all crises are a complete disaster. It can highlight true leadership and selflessness among some, and occasionally some really positive outcomes. So I was wondering if you could share any of your most formidable career experiences and how you've handled them.
Boy, with that lead in on positivity, I think I'm the wrong person to have asked. No, I'm just kidding. But the one that definitely sticks out and is somewhat near and dear to me happened very early in my career, and it certainly felt like a complete disaster for much, much longer than I would have liked as it was going on. I was working for the company that managed the supply chain for Subway, and I owned packaging. And the company was a franchisee-owned co-op, so it's separate from Subway corporate. So I had a counterpart that I worked with there who owned the specs, and we were preparing for the launch and rollout of the then new salad program. So as part of the process, of course, I owned the salad bowl, and there's new product development and testing and all sorts of things that go into it. And for us, the decision ultimately was to move forward with a custom design, and there are different considerations and things that go in. It just sounds so obvious, but and we have Ms. McGovern on the call. She can elaborate as well. There's the shape, there's the volume, there's the type of resin, the color. Are we embossing the lid, the type of closure, all sorts of things. And it was a huge endeavor for the system. This was really to compete with Wendy's and their great success at salad at the time. And there was a strict timeline for managing everything, right? From communication, there's training. You have to consider there at the time are probably 16,000 stores. Marketing in advance of the launch, filling the supply chain, everything. And I'm sure you can already start to guess where this is going. My supplier our manufacturer was behind schedule with their first piece of equipment. They'd been working through some issues, and even though it was producing, they weren't producing anywhere near the committed daily volumes, which was necessary. And then to make things worse, their second piece of tooling, which happened to be coming from Germany, was delayed. Both were needed and for full production to support the program. And I know this is kind of getting into the weeds, but for perspective, the forecast was something like 16 salads per store per day. But it was a huge success, and it was above 20. And I was literally forced to allocate individual cases to individual distribution centers and then work with the distributors to actually manage case counts to the stores. The pressure was pretty immense. It was building daily. It was not a fun time in our relationship. I can certainly say that. I carried the burden as long as I could. And then I finally broke and shared the reality with my director and VP. Again, this was early in my career, and I felt like I had to find a way to fix it. As a stopgap, we ended up going back to one of the suppliers that we'd given consideration to and participated in the process. But of course, they didn't earn the business. They had a stock product that was somewhat similar. And we ultimately made it through, but it was not a great experience in the moment. But there were certainly a lot of lessons learned.
Great, thanks very much. And I think maybe, Stéphanie, a global pandemic could certainly be classified as a bit of a train wreck and a nightmare on a pretty massive scale. But as with all things, we have to, look and sometimes dig deep to find the good in things and what might seem like a negative challenge. So, have you seen any positive impacts on COVID in your industry?
Yes, I have two actually. One on the client side and one on the employee side. So on the IT world, a lot of people said outside of IT, of course, that IT takes time and costs a lot. So during the crisis, what we've seen is the IT team had a huge capacity to adapt, make things happen. So because we focus, we were able to deliver and achieve a huge project in IT for our client. So we were very, very reliable on government decision. It was one decision was made, and then right after we have to react and make sure that, everything is in place for client to make sure that, for example, specific loan for the commercial or stop the mortgage payment for the retail client. So stuff like that. So, and government take decision, people 20 minutes after called the bank and said, okay, how I can do it, So we realized that, because we were able to prioritize, for sure, we deliver a huge project during the crisis. So it means a lot, and then it shows us that, we can do it. So it was very, very positive, because usually that kind of project, takes months and months and maybe a year to deliver, So this is one thing. On the other side, for employee perspective, working from home. Or working from everywhere. This is positive stuff, because before the crisis, it was not all the hiring manager or all the company who said, yeah, I'm convinced you can work from home. Because of this situation, it demonstrates that, it's feasible. Employees are working very on an efficient way and harder and longer than it was supposed to be. First of all, because we are all the time at home. We don't have to commute. So we take this time to work, and we still collaborate. Even if everyone is on their side, we still collaborate and we achieve a lot of stuff. So I think this is very, very nice because, for one that we're not convinced yet, they can see that it's working. So yes, on my perspective, I feel like, it's a positive point.
That's great. Thanks very much. So that's great. We've had some goods, some bads, but let's keep it real. There are a number of times when things can absolutely spiral out of control, COVID or no COVID. And I was wondering, Mike, if you faced any challenges in your career where you thought you were being given a very straightforward procurement activity and it turned out to, surprise you with the hidden complexities and challenges.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, this is the picture I flashed up, right? So this is part in the train wreck category. This is a picture from a slide I did in a presentation about this very topic, actually. So I thought it was funny that train wreck was part of the title of this, right? And it truly became a train wreck initially, right? So the company I was working for was going through a large IT outsourcing RFP selection process, and this part was all going very well. It took a long time, but we picked the right partners, and we came back and, we were a multi-billion-dollar company. So there was a lot of spend in these categories, but we pretty much had we thought we had our arms around it again. But as we started diving into it, we started realizing that, we were going to do some outsourcing of employees, but there was a huge benefit of consolidating all our third-party labor partners as much as we could, right? And as we started looking into it, it went from a couple hundred suppliers to we realized we had a couple thousand different partners who were doing various third-party labor activities within the IT organization. And we were trying to take this and take all these individual processes that were grown up over the years in this multi-billion-dollar company and try to take all these different train tracks of processes and consolidate it into one. So I'm hoping I was in the train that's on top of the pile there, but I do feel like I got squished in the processes as we went through it, trying to work our way through this massive consolidation. And it did feel like a train wreck in the very beginning, right? Because I thought coming out of the supplier selection process at an RFP, now I just go and I start working with the parties to really consolidate it. And on a global basis, it was so hard to kind of get everything together and to get all these partners who were losing business in a lot of ways to cooperate, get internal business partners who felt like things were being taken away from them with long-standing partnerships that they had. And we were trying to not just save money, but get a much more cohesive management of the third-party labor in the organization. And then started adding some internal outsourcing as time and attrition took place, right? So I will call it a train wreck. It was funny that I had this slide here. We eventually, as we kind of moved out of it, we went from having over 1,000 partners and we got it down to about 40. And we ended up getting the vast majority of demand down to less than 5. So it was an amazing consolidation. It wasn't like a 2-week effort. Obviously, it was a multi-year endeavor to get there. But we did go from a train wreck to a nice monorail process and everything streamlined. And it was operating very good. But I do feel like every time I see this slide or see this picture, it takes me back to those initial days where I did feel like it was a train wreck to start out.
It's a great story and a lot of love for the picture as well. And actually, I was going to ask, so, I mean, I anticipated it probably took quite a long time, but, when you started, did you think the project was going to take months and then it ended up being years, or was it always going to be years and it just took more years?
Well, it was one of about 5 major tasks I put on my plan, right? And I've been part of the selection process of getting the outsourcing partners in place. But then I moved from being just one of the businesses involved with it to actually taking over and leading the program, right? So once I kind of took over and started leading the program, that's when I knew I was in serious trouble, to be honest with you, because of the situation, right? And it went from being one of 5 tasks that I thought was going to be 4 or 5 months to being a true multi-year effort. We learned a lot along the way. We did a lot of interesting things that I think we got down some side rails here, to use the analogy further, that didn't work out. But overall, it went from 4 or 5 months to probably a 2-year effort to really consolidate everything. It does take time to do these things, and that's probably the hardest thing to get the business to understand. And at the time, to get our CIO to understand is that as much great backing as I had from the CIOs at the time, this was going to be a longer term effort than any of us ever thought, right? So hopefully that gets to your question.
Brilliant, thank you. And Michael, have you been faced with a situation where everything, despite your best efforts, it's just gone sideways?
I wish I only had one example to think of for this, but sort of tagging along with Mike's, finishing about timing and things taking much longer than desired. One of the most, exciting things about the opportunity for me to go to LendingTree was the idea that I was going to be able to actually design and implement something, my way, and have a vision for my approach. And naturally, as part of that process, at some point, there'd be an introduction of technology to streamline processes and manage work more efficiently, among other things. And as a professional, I've used many tools and prior roles, but none of which were any I'd actually selected. And, doing what we do, going to market, evaluating products, sort of fundamental and at the core of it, right? And now I actually get to do it for me. So to me, that was like an amazing thing. Or I thought it would be. And then I actually began down the path of the journey, which didn't have a formal timeline. But just for simplicity, I was trying to keep demos within certain windows to keep them fresh. And I reached out to all the players that most people would think about, whether I had contacts, whether on their website, reaching out to people on LinkedIn, and also referrals from people in my network. And the responses, or more so the lack thereof, was really astonishing to me. There were a couple that I had to follow up with at least 4 or 5 times. Here I'm just trying to learn about their products, but I do have an aversion to begging. And I ended up eliminating 2 of the more notable ones pretty early on. And then once even engaged, I was surprised and frustrated by the actual rigid sales cycle approach, the introduction of new and different people for each step or each inquiry on my side, another week's delay to coordinate new calls with new people. And then once you're on the phone with them, having to answer the same questions you've already been asked and answered at least twice previously. So for me, it was very different. I was amazed. I was confused. Here, I had a chance to do something very impactful in my new role. And I can't even do what I do how I wanted to do it, so to speak, right? And so needless to say, it took quite a while to make progress. And if I were to fast forward to the point at which there were finalists, which is when I really brought in stakeholders like legal and accounting, even though I already had their requirements, which were always considered and factored in the whole way. We brought them to look at everything, and both were good to go, thumbs up. This was great, until they weren't anymore. I'd essentially made a decision and was in full-blown negotiations. And then accounting reached out to ask me if I'd had a signed contract yet, which I didn't, but was close, because now they were interested in a supplier portal, and they were very impressed with something that they were pitched by one of the companies I'd already eliminated at the start because they were so difficult, which forced me to pause the entire process, obviously be a team player, and also support them in their initiative, right? They're a customer. And then to make things even better, the actual contact person at that supplier is the one who blew me off multiple times. So out of nowhere from this, there became this new strong preference from leadership that we just all had one platform. And the supplier portal was never part of our original scope, so it hadn't even been looked at or considered, despite a very lengthy process that included more than 15 companies and products. So after a few months delay, accounting ended up proceeding with its own alternate solution, and we were good to continue as originally planned. And during the time, we were, fortunately, at least, we were able to use the time and fully vet and learn and get comfortable with who we were trying to partner with in the sandbox environment. And we, configured everything, we customized everything so they could just flip the switch and, go live how we wanted. So that was at least a small silver lining. And then there was another new pause. Our sales and Salesforce teams internally wanted our legal team to start using Salesforce for their request intake and contract management, versus what we were rolling out, which legal was going to use. And initially legal resisted, and we had a unified front. We were all on the same page, which was awesome. I mean, it was really great until it wasn't again. We'd gone down the path. We were ready to go and kick everything off. We had training materials. We had cool posters designed. We leveraged our in-house creative guys, cool caricatures of our team members, scheduled several sessions in person, WebEx, multiple time zones, multiple days. We had fun swag to give away. I was paying for food and drink. Anything to make it not your sort of run-of-the-mill, boring training, despite it was probably scheduled for 25 minutes because it's not much to cover. All of this to have almost nobody attend any of them, which was just crushing. It was shocking for us, very disappointing, because we were so excited. But at the same time, the reality is we weren't concerned about their ability to use the tool and engage us because it's so easy. So our follow-up and next step, we pivoted and focused on just how to get them there, and that was about it. Which of course included very clear instructions on how to use it for an expense request for us and then a revenue request, which would go straight to legal. And then about 6 weeks after launching, legal decided they were going to jump ship and use Salesforce. So we continued forward, and it's been great for our team, but throughout the process, it just completely felt like everything was stacked against us for something that seems kind of ordinary and basic for especially folks like us in what we do all the time. And it was just unnecessarily painful, but that's the reality that we had to work through.
That is torturous. But I just wondered, and I know that you have to be impartial and, look at, suppliers objectively, but I am someone who holds a grudge. So those salespeople, like if I had worked with them in a previous role and then had come across them in a new job, I would be reluctant to work with them. So, I mean, do you just let that all go over your head, or are you a bit of a grudge holder as well?
I would like to say I'm better than that. I am 1,000% open to the company and their products because I'm always looking for what's in the best interest of my team and my company. But I would want to work with somebody else. I would have to work with somebody else.
What about the rest of the panel? Are you okay with, or is it just my Scottish genes that get me all angry and raged up? How about you, Simona? You seem like a kind of cool, calm person until someone does something really, really bad, and then that is it. It's all hell goes loose.
Stern Simona is sure to come out, yes, and let them know. But I think the relationships that I built with current suppliers who still reach out to me today and remember me for having worked and negotiated contracts with them. There's a level of respect that they know there's one part of the relationship that's quote unquote personal, right? How are you doing? How's your family? All of that stuff. And the other part of the relationship is business. And I think I've been successful or lucky, take your pick, on being able to walk that thin ground. My first example, definitely, I had to be stern. They were shocked. But it was interesting because as soon as they left, I was getting emails. The next day I was getting emails, right? I let them sit a little bit because it's like, no. You made Mona mad, so you're going to have to sit a little bit, right? But truly out of a professional, respectful perspective, right? Never not disrespectful, but needed them to calm down. We needed to calm down and have conversations. But yeah, I know when to be stern and when not to. And when they know I'm getting stern, they know it's purely about business. It's not personal.
Mike, what about you?
Yeah, I've probably been known to hold a grudge or two, right? But, I typically, I want my company to want to, do business with suppliers who want to do business with us on terms that we agree to and that are not, unwieldy for them, right? And you're going to get into conflict sometimes as you're kind of working your way through that. And there's bad behaviors that suppliers do. And we've had some suppliers who we just won't do business with after a while, or representatives. But we're also open-minded in that, we're going to continually look, and if it at some point becomes advantageous for our company to work with that company again due to a new capability or a change in business circumstances, we're not just going to say absolutely not, right? We'll try to change the circumstances to our liking, whether it's, like Michael talked about, probably changing out the representation or the people you're working with.
Yeah.
Going to their leadership and having heart-to-hearts at that level. It typically works out. You got to, in the end, do the right thing for your company for what is most important. But, a grudge might feel good at first, but if you hold on to it too long, it actually can work against you.
Yeah, I guess the difference for me is it's my business. So I take it really personally. You guys can be like, right, this is for the company. But how about you, Stéphanie? Are you quite chilled about that?
Something on my side, Mike and Simona, relation, the supplier relation, it's so important. And then because they become a business partner. So when you are in a bad position, it's good to feel like, you can count on them. Yeah. And, I have business partner from many, many years and they still call me. And then, I do business with them again. And then something happened on my side. It didn't went well at all. But he saved the situation and we were able to move forward. So it's a long-term relation for sure. I believe in that. I believe in, be transparent. Be transparent as much as you can, of course, but, and be able to say, when it's a bad situation, be able to say what you have to say.
Yeah. Perfect.
So, and be fair. So
yeah, and I guess like in procurement, you guys are wearing a number of different hats. So you might be dealing with those suppliers across a multiple range of categories. So yeah, it's a little bit different. But I know that something that can be particularly tricky is contingent labour. It can be highly political, and have you dealt with any situations where that's not gone quite as planned for you, Stéphanie?
Yeah, it's the same situation as Michael also. In my previous life, we implemented the managed service provider program, the MSP, because the contingent labor, it's a huge category. It depends on the company, but usually it's a huge category. So we decided to implement the MSP. but it's, oh my God. Sometimes I remember this project. At the end of the day, it was really, really successful, but the process to be there, oh my God, it was a huge change management. And maybe we underestimate this. When we were in the process to implement this program, so the key was, communication, and also communication and training, of course. But, when we started to, from a decentralized model to a centralized model, there's a lot of impact. And you have to manage the hiring manager. You have to manage the executives. You have to manage a bunch of stuff, your business partner and then stakeholder. So you have to make sure that, everybody understand the program. Everyone received the communication, the training. So anyway, so it was a huge project. But at the end of the day, it was a real successful program. But, we need time also. People need time to feel like, okay, I play with the tool. Okay, now I understand after a few months. Oh, okay, it's not that complicated. So because they feel like, I will lose my power to hire the person that I want to hire. So effectively, there's a lot of political stuff to manage. On the other side, when I arrived in this role, we already had the MSP program, and then they give me a list of a lot of insatisfaction from the user. And then I said, and then the meeting with the CIO was already scheduled, and I said, no way. I will arrive with this list and talk about, that kind of stuff. So instead, I called procurement and I said, I think we should work together to transform that list to a list of optimization. So this is what we did actually. So we transformed, for each point, we made an action, and then we call it an action plan. And then we presented to the CIO, and the CIO was good to go. So what we did is, we improved the program to make sure that, the hiring manager was happy at the end of the day, because the program is there to support the hiring manager, not the other side. So anyway, because we had an open mind, we had open communication with procurement, it helps a lot. So what we did is I did a little tour on the VP Vice President Committee to share what we've done so far, what is coming, and then people were very happy that finally someone listened to them and made some changes. Another great example related to this is we had a lot of difficulties to hire specific contractors before the COVID. It was worse during the COVID. So I said, okay, we need to adapt the program. I know that there's a rule, but sometimes we can manage outside of the rules, So we put in place a process that now, we can hire a specific contractor at the right cost, of course, but in the less time as possible, because this is so important. Of course, procurement focus a lot on savings, on cost, but there's more than that. So anyway, long story short, to say that, finally everybody was happy because IT represents 90% of the spend. So IT was happy because we put in place a specific process for that kind of contractor. Procurement was happy because we had a process, and then we still follow and continue to manage the savings. So anyway, so everybody was happy, but it's communication. It's a teamwork and a lot of communication. So, I presented like it's really easy, but on a day-to-day basis, it's not easy at all.
Yeah, that's been a great section. I've picked up that supplier relationships are really important, and longevity with them. Communication. Mm-hmm. And I think finally, and most importantly, do not mess with the Mona, because you're in trouble. So that has been some real great takeaways, I think, for all of us. So we've got a wee poll here that's come up. So has the stress of 2020 led you to develop any strange, silly or productive new hobbies or coping methods? So pick, they're not literal. So pick what kind of aligns with you most spiritually, and we'll see what those results bring. And while we're doing that, if we just jump on to the next question, because I can't believe we're running out of time already. It's just flown by. There have been a lot of learning. So, how can we help other procurement professionals learn from the catastrophes? Simona, have you had some really great advice that you've received in the past, or that you would pass on, or have you learned some things that you would like to share with the new generation coming up?
Sure. I think patience is something that you'll need to have, right? There's this whole theory on negotiations, whether it's win-win. I don't necessarily believe it's win-win. You find a middle ground that everybody is aligned to. So you've got to find that middle ground and be collaborative, right? So collaboration is key. In being patient and collaborating, it's about building that partnership, right? Are you looking at your agencies as suppliers, vendors? Are you looking at them as partners in your business to help you strategically get where you want to go, right? To do that, you've got to build a relationship with them, whether they're new coming in or they're established, either one. You've got to collaborate and build that relationship. And then specific around negotiations, make sure you have the players at the table, and most of you, know this, that actually are the decision makers, right? And make sure that you align with your business partners before you go into negotiations, that you built the trust there, that they'll lean in and know that you are taking them down the yellow brick road and that you're going to be safe. And then I think the last piece is where I started. Shut it down. If it's not going and you can't find the middle ground and the temperature in the room is heating up and people are starting to get combative, like it's okay to step out of the room and let people calm down, and or shut it down if need be. Say thank you. This has been great, but we're going to take some time. We're going to think about it. We're going to give you time to think about it, and we'll come back in a couple of days to a week and see if we can find that middle ground.
Fantastic. If I wasn't unemployable, I would absolutely come and work for you. I think you'd be a great boss to work for. And Mike, what do you see as the key role for a high-performing procurement organization that provides?
When it comes to kind of managing these things, I look at it as, the number one thing that I try to think about, and no matter what we do, whatever process we put in place, no matter who we hire, no matter how we work with stakeholders, is we're the people who are kind of managing the risk associated to the spend in your company, right? And some of that is obvious in a deal. It's immediate. It's in front of you. You want to make sure you do it right and you get the best bang for your buck and the dollars. But if you look at some of the things I talked about, or some of the others, big events, COVID is a big event, or a big divestiture like I talked about, they reveal all kinds of risks that maybe, you could kind of look the other way on certain procurement activities. And suddenly it comes out when you don't have the proper controls, you don't have the right language in your agreements that are going to help protect you as you go through an acquisition or divestiture activity. There's a lot that we do on a day-to-day basis that isn't readily obvious as to why we put that extra effort in and why we ensure that finance and IT and security team and whoever you need in the business is reviewing, including legal, of course, these things, right? It's not just to protect the risk today, but it's that future risk down the line of not having the good deals in place, the things that can stand up to the test of time. So, I'm always trying to preach about, we're here to manage the risk associated to the spend. No one else here is going to do that. And the CFO, when he signs off on something, is expecting that we've done all our due diligence to make sure that risk is highlighted, brought to people's attention. And if people decide to go forward anyway, at least we've done that. If we don't do that, and if something comes up later, then we stand exposed to, be told, hey, they expect you to do that, right? But it isn't always readily obvious initially.
Perfect. Brandon, do you want to do the results now? Let's see what's dying to see this. Oh, a lot of master gardeners. Do you want to take it away?
So has the stress of 2020 led you to develop any strange, silly, productive new hobbies? We're just going with the spirit, the theme here. I like that there's a lot of productive people. So some people are now master gardeners. They cultivate their own yeast. I've definitely got some friends that went that route. They're like, their backyards look entirely different than when COVID started. Like they're like, yeah, I learned bricklaying this weekend, like 10 hours on YouTube. And then, like just fun stuff like that. Like you got to find something just to get your mind off things. Never been a smoker. Now at 2 packs a day plus 3 bottles of wine. One person. I think we've all had days like that. Maybe that
wasn't me, but whoever it was, I'm with you on that one. The wine bit, definitely.
Maybe it's not the general theme of their coping, but like there's definitely days where that's the one. I've polished every inch of baseboard in my house with a toothbrush, about 6 people. I was kind of surprised because I thought that's the way I would be. I'm very OCD, but I went a slightly different route. There's I'm here physically, but mentally I'm off in imagination land. 2 people definitely helps, especially on like a Friday. Like I'm just going to be a kid inside my head for a day and do something a little different. Couple people selling their house, going off the grid, collecting rainwater, powering their homes with compost. I thought about that too. Costa Rica is very affordable, by the way. I've looked into it. Like, should I buy an RV and just ditch, or do I buy a place in like a cheap country like Thailand or Costa Rica? One person said other. So
I wonder what that is. Does anyone want to admit to the other? Hope we might find out in the comments. Oh, thanks very much for that. So I think we need to end on a high. So we've had some great shared stories here. But yeah, it's not all doom and gloom. And I think, Simona, you can probably give us a hilarious experience that you've had and leave us laughing for the rest of the day.
I don't know if I'll leave you laughing, but I will try. We talked about building relationships with your business partners, collaboration. In my early years, as I was starting out, I would always say in my negotiations, whether I understood or didn't understand, talk to me like a third grader, right? Like just to make sure I'm crystal, everybody in the room is on the same page. Talk to me like a third grader, just explain it to me. It was one of my things that I would do or say. The other thing I would always tell my vendors or agencies was, in negotiation, if they weren't hitting the budget, hey, I need you to go back and sharpen your pencil. Look at that again. Let's figure it out, sharpen your pencil. In one particular instance with a supplier that was providing us on-site project management support in the marketing area, they were just way off budget, just way off budget. And we had been building the partnership. It had been growing and evolving. I had realized through negotiation that some of their team members, because they had access to the system, was able to see what jobs were available. So there was attrition going on because they were moving from their company into our company at the time. And so we had, this big negotiation over not only that annual contract, but the fee that we would pay for this attrition, right? Because they were losing people and then they'd have to restock us with that individual and the cost that it incurred for them. They wanted to pass that cost on to us. I said, yeah, I get it, but I'm not going to pay the whole cost. And we need to come down on your overall fees and everything. Go back, sharpen your pencil, come back with a better estimate result proposition. So they did, got through the negotiations. We finish up. Everything's signed. We pass it on. We're ready. We're done. I come into the office, I think on a Friday, like the end of that week of all of this negotiation. And on my office door was this email and a picture. And I just was, as I'm walking up to it, I'm like, is that my pink paper? Like, what's going on here? Am I getting fired? Like, what is this thing? Right. So I get up to it, and the supplier had emailed my boss saying that it was a pleasure working with me. They've, been working with me for a while, and as a business partner, as their sourcing person, they were really excited, every time we collaborated and engaged and how personable I was. But when it comes to negotiation, she definitely has the velvet hammer. And so she always tells us to go back and sharpen our pencils. And so the picture was like of a brand new, and I don't know if you guys are pencil people, but I'm a pencil person, that first sharpening of the pencil, it's so pretty, and the point and the lead and all that, like there was this perfect pencil and it said Simona's pencil. And then below that was this itty bitty snub of just like the eraser and like barely some lead. And it was like our pencil.
Oh, brilliant. I love that.
So that stayed with me for my whole time at Walmart. And I was known as either the velvet hammer or the velvet glove.
Brilliant. And I think, again, that's great testament to the kind of relationships you had with your suppliers as well, that you can have that kind of fun.
Yeah.
Oh, that's brilliant. Well, thank you, everybody, so much. I've had a great time. I could sit and chat to you again for another hour. It's been brilliant. If anyone wants to connect with you or get hold of you or has any questions, is there a way they can find you?
I can put all the panelists in the follow-up email, but
fabulous.
So when I send out the follow-up email, I'm going to process the video recording. Everyone here will get a link to that. If there's anyone you need help connecting to, just respond, let me know. Any way I can help, we're all here to help. So if there's anything we can do, just respond back, let us know.
Perfect. So just finally, I'll just check if there's any final questions for any of the panelists. You have a couple of seconds to type something up. And while you're thinking about that, I will just tell you about the next PTalk, which is August the 11th, and it's 1 p.m. Eastern time. So again, you'll be in for some more fun, fear, and frolicking. I don't know, that's probably not the right word, but it sounds exciting, doesn't it? More shoes. Well, actually, we can always do a little goodbye with the shoes. There you go. The shoes say goodbye. Thank you so much for all your time. Thank you for everyone who's been watching us. I hope you've enjoyed it, and please come back again next month. It'd be great to see you again.